So I've spent the last 2 to 3 weeks with a Chinese phone in my pocket, and though I've loved its camera, and we will get to that, there are some interesting and actually quite relevant compromises you make when you're using something that's just not meant for your home market. Today I want to discuss my experience with using, well, an imported Chinese phone, and why I would or wouldn't recommend them. The goal of this video isn't to sway you either way, to persuade you to buy one, it's just to share my personal experience and, after spending some time with an imported device, really give you my anecdotal evidence. This is the Vivo X100 Ultra and it's not a review. I've already done one on this phone. I moved my SIM out of my OnePlus 12 and into this phone for a handful of weeks after buying the Vivo from eBay secondhand. These devices are not available in many parts of the world, including the market that I'm currently in, so you have to either pay to get them imported from China directly, or you can buy one locally that's already gone through that process, which is what I did. Save the hassle. This was posted and the next day I had it. The whole thing was really easy. I just use eBay, and eBay is pretty safe. Like, I have bought some duds before and had Buy Protection step in and just do a phenomenal job. So I'm absolutely happy buying through eBay. Some of you might not be, but that's fine. Weirdly, I found them to be considerably cheaper than their Western counterparts. I'm not sure why this is. Maybe it has to do with being imported, which costs money. This is by no means a low-end phone. It's one of the most feature-rich smartphones you can buy, and yet it costs like half the cost of a brand new S24 Ultra, and this is like brand new, basically pristine, with all the original accessories in the box. So I can't really work that one out, but yeah, these seem to be quite a bit cheaper because they're the Chinese versions. The first thing you notice when you turn these things on is just how much Chinese like fluff and bloat is on here. I mean, you are buying a Chinese phone, that's kind of what you should be expecting. But no, a lot, if not all of it, is quite easily removable. So I just spent like an hour going through trying to de-China my Chinese phone. I uninstalled all of the applications, went through and removed all of them, changed the keyboard to Gboard, got rid of the launcher screen that has like the Chinese news down the side where Google Now News would be, and then disabled the double tap power option, which usually would bring up like Vivo payment system, and instead it does nothing. You actually use double tap of the volume down to get your camera up on this phone. It's not necessarily perfect, and there are certainly some things in there, like in the settings menu, that still remind you this is a Chinese phone for the Chinese market, but this is quite de-China'd right now, and it feels not so bad. This is Origin OS 5, by the way, based on Android 15. It feels pretty similar to like Oxygen OS or Color OS to me. It's not exactly the same, and one concern I have with it is you're not getting the same level of like long-term software support as something like a Pixel 9 or a Galaxy S24, but that's something I'm willing to live with. I'm not sure if you are. I had to go into the Vivo App Store when I first got this phone and then search the Play Store and then download it and install it. It was really that simple to get Google services running on this thing, and I'm not sure if everything works, but for example like YouTube, Gmail, games that need Google Play services to run, they all work on here. It's not just like you only get the Play Store. It seems like Google services are working in almost their entirety on here, which is quite good. There are going to be devices that you import that you are going to need to go through more hassle to get Play services up and running. It's not going to be the same for every single one, and so that is one of the big points in buying an imported phone. Make sure you can get Google Play services running if you want. If you don't want Google Play services, then none of them come with it by default, so I guess it's ideal for you. But yeah, I loaded up stuff like my 3D games, and my Google Play Games account just like loaded up just fine. So if you're a big mobile gamer and you want to like carry across saves or something like that, that also seems to be a thing that works with these imported phones, or at least in my case. Connectivity is a big one. This is where a lot of people get a bit stuck when they import their phones because they don't know whether it's going to connect to their 4G, their 5G, their LTE. I ran mine mostly on the O2 network in the UK and found there to be basically zero issues over LTE and 5G. The 5G itself, the signal reception in my area is actually pretty bad anyway, so I fully expected this to like fail at the first hurdle, but no, it picked up the same kind of signal quality as my OnePlus 12, my iPhone, my Pixel. It was pretty good, and that's something I wasn't expecting but was pleasantly surprised by. But again, this is something you have to check. Not all phones are going to have that, especially in the US. There are a lot of phones that won't run on those networks, so you have to go and check the bands that your carrier supports, and then the bands that the phone supports and make sure they match up, which is again a bit of a hassle, but I guess if you're going through the hassle of importing a phone, probably part of your mindset. From what I've read online, from other people who have specifically bought this phone, the Vivo X100 Ultra, and I'm sure this stuff would apply to other phones as well, stuff like Android Auto might not work, which could be a deal breaker for some. It's not for me, I don't drive, and my missus doesn't have a car with Android Auto, but that could be a big thing to you. And also, I read on Reddit that someone had an issue with eSIM not working, so if you're using eSIM, it's just not going to work on here. Google Wallet supposedly works, but I don't use mobile phone payments, so I can't substantiate that. And again, it's kind of a pain importing phones. You have to do a lot of Googling and make sure that this stuff works. Also, a lot of Chinese apps aren't super useful, so like if you want the AI features or you want the features you would typically get on your Samsung or on your Pixel, that's all going to be in Chinese here, and a lot of it just isn't translatable. So unless you speak Cantonese or Mandarin or whatever the language that comes on this is, you are just not going to have the best time. And so if you want a feature-rich software experience in particular, that is not great on an imported phone, or maybe not all of them, but a good chunk of them. There are obviously some justifiable security concerns going over the Western devices compared to the Chinese ones. Your data is almost certainly going to be piped back to somewhere you don't want it. Like a lot of other phones, only this time it's to China and not to the United States via Google. Or maybe it is, it could be both. I have the Google Play services on here, so China and the US get to see all of my data. I'm not sure if I'm one way or the other on this, I'm kind of on the fence. I wish none of our data went anywhere, but it's also incredibly convenient to use the stuff that unfortunately has the downside of sending your data everywhere. So if you're a big anti-conglomerate, anti-sending data anywhere, these phones might not be great, because a lot of them have been found to send stuff back to China, stuff you might not want going anywhere. This is a topic of great importance, but also much debate, and so I'm not going to try and sway you either way, because at the end of the day, I really have no horse in this race. It matters not to me whether you buy one of these or you don't. I know people who swear by phones like this that have been imported, and I know people who would not go near them. One thing I might add is I wouldn't go for like a non-name brand phone out of China. A Huawei, a Vivo, an Oppo, but unbranded stuff, really murky, I wouldn't bother. Those three brands, I'd be pretty happy buying those. The benefits of going with something like this versus what you get out of Samsung and Google and Apple is that you tend to get a bit more hardware, and sometimes for your money too. Like crazy cameras, 1-inch sensors you're just not getting in any modern smartphone in the West, charging tech like the brick in the box 100-watt charging, features like an IR blaster, which yeah, you might find on some smartphones, but certainly not all of them. The extra hardware on offer here for similar or less money is quite enticing, and I think it's probably due to more acceptable manufacturing costs. If a company is in China and they're doing their manufacturing in China and buying parts from China, seems easier to get stuff done, cheaper, and takes less time than if they were a company based in the US or Europe and then tried to get their stuff done through China. And it seems like the savings do get passed down to the end user as well. So that's why you end up with a phone that, you know, if this was made by Samsung might cost $2,000, and yet you can buy these for £600 or £700. This is actually one of the main reasons why I think Samsung, Apple and Google haven't done this kind of hardware themselves, because it would just cost too much and their phones would end up costing an absolute fortune, but that's just speculation on my part. I personally don't mind using something like this because what I end up with is a product I prefer for the money. And I'm a bit of a camera nerd, which probably plays a big part in it, but I know that not everyone is comfortable with this sort of setup, and to be totally frank, I get it. Many of your concerns are valid. For most people, I think it's going to be worth just buying in your home market just to avoid headaches. You can just buy a good third-party wall wart if you want faster charging, and smartphone hardware is already so good that I'm sure most people, this is just completely irrelevant. It's just that if you're a bit of a nerd like me and you want to try something a bit different, importing might be your only option.